Hi friends, welcome to Harmony Hills Home and Garden. I'm Jenny and we live and garden here in Baltimore, Maryland, Zone 7. Today's project is to take care of a bunch of bearded iris rhizomes that I had dug up to transplant to other parts of the garden. I'm going to be preparing these for replanting and for storage. So come with me and let's talk about iris rhizomes and how to take care of them. So as part of this project, I'm going to be separating these, inspecting them for damage, and choosing the best ones for replanting or for storage. Now you may have seen the last couple of videos that I did. One of them, I was taking plants out of an area and replanting with plants that are better suited for that area. Over here, I took out a bunch of hostas, some iris, some coneflower, and a serviceberry tree, and I forget what else. And then in the next video, I was showing you how I was taking care of all those plants that I had taken out, planting them in other places, potting them up, etc. And so I didn't get around to getting all of these irises taken care of. I have, I don't know, a big pile of these iris rhizomes that I need to take care of. So let's get underway. There's all kinds of construction happening in the neighborhood today, so lots of noises. I hope that my microphone is working well enough. First of all, tall bearded iris grow from rhizomes, and these are very fibrous, big fat roots that live right at the surface of the soil. And then they also have these more typical root systems that go down into the soil. So this one, for example, would have been planted in the ground right at the soil level right here, and these are the roots down here that would anchor the plant into the ground, gather nutrients from the soil, and feed the stalks of leaves and flowers that come up from the ends of the rhizomes. Now, I think they look like little lobsters, don't you? I think they're so cute. All right, so the way that I'm going to take care of these, you might find other methods other places, but I'm going to use my pruners, and I'm going to cut off the leaves first. And clearly, my bucket is not big enough to hold all the leaves that I'm going to be cutting off. Okay, so that leaves me with the rhizome itself, just a little bit of leaf here, and the roots. Now, I'm going to be inspecting this for something called what's it called? Borer, iris borer. So if you think you might have iris borer, you should be inspecting it for little small holes around on the rhizome. Now, let's take a look at this one. I think it's kind of interesting. So this rhizome does have small holes right here. But if you look at the area that has been most recently growing, right here, you can see these roots go into the rhizome. And that looks exactly like where the roots came out of the rhizome, down here. So I don't know if these holes are iris borer holes or if they're formerly roots. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not sure if this is borer damage or if it is just where the roots used to be. If you know, please let me know. I'd love to learn from you. But anyway, so on this rhizome, this one, these two here are spent, and we're going to break this off just with like that. And we're going to break this off just like that. Keep these and throw this one away. Now, when you're doing this, you want to keep a rhizome that is at least 2 inches long. And this one right here, I could break these further apart, but this one right here is really only about an inch, inch and a half long. It may not be big enough to actually give a really good strong plant. But on the other hand, as I inspect this one, most of these roots have dried up, which leads me to think that maybe this portion of the rhizome is spent also. So I'm going to take a risk because I have so many of these irises. I'm going to go ahead and break this one here too. And now this is the rhizome that I'm going to replant. It will put up one fan of flowers, and over time it will grow new rhizomes also that look eventually like this was before I took it apart. So next, okay, now I've got it down to the rhizome that I think I want to keep. But before I decide to keep it or not, I'm going to inspect it further for damage. So first I'm looking for holes that would indicate borer, and I don't see any. I don't see any holes at all. So I think that is safe from this perspective. And then the other thing I'm looking for is soft spots. Are there any areas where this rhizome has started to rot? And I just feel it. I also inspect it with my eyes and look for it. But I don't see any areas of rot. So I think this one is going to be a nice healthy rhizome that I can replant. So I'm going to set this one right over here. And now I'm going to turn my attention to the rest of the rhizome here. So again, this one is probably, this is the center, this is the old one, this is probably ready to be thrown away. I'm going to break off over here. I have a little teeny tiny baby one here. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. Take that off. This is a healthier one. I'm looking for borers. I don't see any. I also don't see any soft spots. So another healthy rhizome. This is the mother one, and it does have roots on it, but these are starting to dry up and become old compared to the other ones that I just took apart. So I think this one is going into the compost pile. Okay, and so that's the method for how I'm going to deal with and process all of these iris rhizomes. So let me just get that job going. Okay, I've come across one here that looks like it has some rotted damage here. See how this is yellow and kind of slimy and mushy? Down in the rhizome itself, it feels solid, but I'm not going to risk it. I'm just going to break this one off and throw that one, well, I'll throw it in the compost bin. But over on this side, I think I have a healthy one here. So this is the keeper. The other one, I'm not going to keep. And then the rest of this is all spent. Now, another thing I didn't mention earlier, when you pull these out of the soil, they're going to have soil connected to the roots down here. And so you want to kind of get that off before you start to evaluate, because you really do need to see the whole rhizome before you make any decisions about its health. So pull them out of the soil, and you can either hose them down or you can just let them dry out a little bit, and that soil will fall off and you can brush the rest of it off, and then you can inspect the plants from that point. On this one, the two side shoots are actually the live rhizomes over here and over here, but because they're so small, they're each only about an inch long, I'm going to leave them connected to this mother rhizome here. And while this rhizome probably won't send up another flower stalk from there, it will at least feed and allow these other side ones to grow bigger. And so I'm going to leave these connected like that. Here's one that is pretty small. I'm going to go ahead and take it off and give it a shot. It may not survive, but it does have roots of its own, so I'm going to give this one a shot. And then over here I've got two more side shoots, and each of them have side shoots. So on this one, again, each of these are pretty small. I just took a small one off and saved it, but these small ones, this small one doesn't have any roots of its own, but this one does. So I'm going to take this one off and let it be on its own because it has its own roots. And I'm going to leave this one on, the mother, because it doesn't really have its own roots yet. It will grow them, but they're not there yet. So I'm going to leave this one connected to the mother. But over here on this one, I'm going to separate because each of these new side shoots have their own roots. Look at this one. That's crazy. It's actually two different rhizomes that each have multiplied so often that they're just really long chain. Now this is an example of one that I'm not going to try to save. You can see how the mother has just desiccated. It's just dried up and shriveled up. And all I see is holes. I don't see any viable roots here. So compost bin for this one. All right, I think I got all of the rhizomes out of the soil bag that I was working from. And this is how many I got. I'm just going to select some rhizomes to be planted into the ground out in the front yard. Now, these particular rhizomes are Harvest of Memories iris. They are a tall bearded iris, and they're a reblooming type. So well, if I hadn't dug them up, they would have bloomed in this fall. They might still, probably not though. They're a beautiful clear yellow. I love this iris. It blooms in the spring gorgeously, and then again in October or so. And I'm really happy with this iris. So I'm going to be planting 4, I believe, rhizomes all in the same general area, so they will look as if they're one plant. And so let's go get our spot ready. I recently was talking about how this area of my garden is feeling like it needs to be a little bit reworked due to the similarity of all of the leaf color and texture in here. So I think also in that video recently I mentioned how this Gara here is not pleasing me. I don't like the way it looks. I don't like the way it is performing, or rather not performing the way I want it to. So I'm going to actually take this Gara out, and I'm going to put these iris rhizomes right here. And I think that will provide, once the rhizomes have grown their new leaves, it'll provide a tall gray-green strappy leaf texture right here, which will be a nice contrast to change up this area a little bit. I still have more to do in this area, but it's going to happen in the fall. So for now, I'm just going to get this Gara out of here and put these rhizomes in the area. I also have some Biotone starter fertilizer here, and that's really all I need to get this planted. You can see how shallow rooted this Gara was. I mean, it has kind of an interesting foliage texture, but what I grow Gara for are the tall spikes of wispy flowers. And here we are in late July, and it hasn't done that yet. And I need that to do that earlier in the season. So this is coming out. Okay, now I'm just going to kind of loosen up the soil here and get it nice and free and not clumpy. And by the way, I'm so sorry for all the noise in the neighborhood today. The neighbors down the way are having their house painted, so there's lots of sanding going on over there, and then there's random trees being taken down and just lots of stuff happening. All right, I'm just going to pull some of the mulch out of the way so I can reuse that. And then I'm just going to use my hand spade and just loosen up this soil. I'm right by an irrigation line, I think. Is that the supply line or is that the emitter line? Yeah, there's an emitter right there. So we're nice and moist in here. I see lots of worms, so that's a good sign too. Okay. Get that all loosened up. Now I'm going to mix in Biotone right in there and just kind of mix it together like that. And this is why I don't have good manicures, because I often forget to wear gloves. All right, so now the way to plant an iris is these have to go down into the soil to hold the plant firm and steady in the earth. And then the top part of the rhizome needs to be visible to the sun, because that is how the rhizome grows and gets a lot of energy. And that's actually what makes irises flower nicely also, is when the rhizome can be seen and get sunlight. So, did you see how I did that? I'm going to pull this loose soil aside, including the worms. I'm going to snake these roots way down into the soil. Actually, if I can get that deeper, that'd be better. So many worms, my goodness. Okay, those roots down in there. Hold this right at soil level, and then backfill the soil down around those roots. So those roots are really nice and down in there, which is good for steadying the plant as it grows new leaves. And then put the soil back nearby, kind of tamp it firmly around those roots, but don't cover up the rhizome completely. All right, I'm just going to continue that 2 more times to get this other one planted as well. I hit a root of something down in there. Okay. All right, there we go. So I've got 4 iris rhizomes planted here in a clump. They'll grow, they'll put out their leaves, they'll multiply, they'll put out more leaves over time. And they will bloom beautifully. They want to be in full sun. They want to be in well-draining soil. Otherwise they might rot, and they want their rhizomes to be able to gather sunlight. So you see how I'm bringing the mulch back around to cover the soil, but I am not covering the rhizomes with the mulch. There we go. All right, and that soil was nice and moist, so I don't even need to water this in. This is going to run tomorrow. It'll be just fine. All right, I now am going to pot some of these up. And the reason you might want to do that is because you might want to keep them, but you're not sure where you want to plant them, so you can store them and get them regrowing. Or you might want to give them away as a gift that's already underway for a friend, or you might want to sell them, or there's lots of reasons you might want to pot them up. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm just going to use, excuse me, I'm just going to use some general potting mix that I got at the garden center and fill the bottom couple of inches, but then I'm going to well, let me do it this way. Okay, so I put a couple of inches of soil down in there. I'm going to put some biotone in there as well, just to help it out. Okay, and now I'm going to put 3 or 4 of these rhizomes in the same pot, just to be a nice generous plant. Maybe I'll put 3 because that's how many I can hold in my hand. And then I'm going to, kind of like I did in the soil out front, I'm just going to put the soil down in there and let them cover the roots. It's a little bit of a trick. You might want to have a helper. It's be a good job to have your kids helping you with. All right, so I don't want the rhizomes to be covered with soil, but I do want all of their roots to be covered with soil. So here's a trick. Just cover them up and then gently jiggle them until they slide up to the area they need to be. That way the roots stay in the soil, but the rhizomes come to the top. Kind of like that. Tamp that all down, uncover those rhizomes, and there they go. So there's 3 rhizomes in this container, and they will each put up a new shoot of leaves, and this will be a nice generous plant to put in the ground a little bit later. There we go. I went ahead and added a 4th one over here. And now I have 2 pots, each with 4 rhizomes. Of course, I want to label these because my memory is not as good as I like to think. Okay, so now I have quite a few rhizomes left. They're all fairly small because I threw away the mother bits of most of them. Now, if I want to store these for the long term, what I would do is let them lay here on this table or inside in a cool place. Dry place is really what you want. In fact, we're due to have some rain, so I will be moving them off this table. But if you live in a drier climate, you could just leave them out on a table like this. It's got some airflow around them. Separate them. And you let them dry for, I don't know, 3 to 5 days, something like that. What you're looking for is that they have dried all the soil. The soil is no longer moist on it. And then it could even have a little bit of a, like a baked potato kind of skin on it. But what you don't want is for them to shrivel up and dry so much that they have no more moisture. You just want the outside of them to be kind of calloused over so that they're not going to rot when you put them into dry storage. So 3 to 5 days in a cool, dry place. Dark is fine, doesn't need light. And then what you do after they're nice and dry, you brush off as much of the soil as you need to get them relatively cleaned off. And then you wrap each one in some newspaper or tissue paper or whatever kind of paper you have that's free and recyclable. You wrap them up into some paper and then store them in a cardboard box. Now you want the box and the paper that you have to have some airflow to it because you don't want these to rot, but you don't want them to dry out completely, and that's why you wrap them in paper and then put them in a box. It's kind of a balance between being nice and dry with airflow and drying out too much. So you can store them over the winter and then plant them in the springtime. Because we're here in July, I don't feel great about storing them in that way for such a long time. That would be a really long time from now. But that is how you would do it. Say if you were doing this task in the fall, like when irises are supposed to be dug and divided and cared for in this way. So that's something you would do in the late fall, and then you could store them that way over the winter until the spring. So that is what you could do. But for what I'm going to do, you can leave them out like this for up to a week, maybe even 10 days. You could probably even stretch it a little bit further, but up to a week or so, they'll be totally fine, just like this. So I'm going to actually take these to my chorus rehearsal tonight, and I'm going to offer them up to anybody who wants some, and they can take whatever they want and plant them in their own garden. And then any that are left over, I'll bring home tonight, and then I'll offer them up on the side of my house tomorrow to my neighbors. So, you know, and any that I have left, I'll probably plant somewhere because I love them so much. But I do have one planted and two potted that I'm going to keep for myself. And so I can, you know, give these away and still have plenty for myself. So that is the story about how to deal with tall bearded iris. Again, this is a task that normally you would do in the fall or maybe even in the spring, but usually in the fall after the growing season is over. But I did it now because I was revamping that garden space, and I needed to have these taken out so that I could rework that space. So irises are pretty hardy, so I imagine that these will recover just fine from being mishandled. Not mishandled, just handled at the wrong time of year for perfection. If you have any questions about how to deal with tall bearded iris, put them in the comment section down below and I'll do my best to answer them. But also, if you know about tall bearded iris and you have methods that are similar to this or different from this, or you have different experiences, please let me know there too. I think a lot of our commenters read the comments and learn from what you say, so please share your knowledge there. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you're having a wonderful day in your gardens. I'll see you again in another video real soon, friends. Take care. Bye-bye.